I have always been amused by a kind of a paradox. Suppose you go around and ask people. The United States, as you know, before 1914 had completely free immigration. Anybody could get on a boat and come to these shores, and if he landed on Ellis Island, he was an immigrant. Was that a good thing or a bad thing? You will find hardly a soul who will say it was a bad thing. Almost everybody will say it was a good thing. But then I suppose I say to the same people, but now what about today? Do you think we should have free immigration? Oh no, they'll say, we couldn't possibly have free immigration today.
Perhaps the libertarian view of immigration can be summed up by paraphrasing that whole speech by Milton Friedman with this: you cannot have open borders and a welfare state. A welfare state is a government which attempts to provide a minimum subsidised standard of living for all inhabitants, regardless of demonstration of need. To keep it simple, you can think of universal basic income in the way of US Democrat nominee Andrew Yang's initiative, which he calls the Freedom Dividend. Without even considering how bad of an idea such programs are economically, both in theory and proven practice, this specifically relates to immigration, as what you create by doing this is nothing more than a honeypot for people who do not seek to build a better life for themselves, their family and the community that they join, but to be given a better life at the direct cost of others who were afforded no choice in the matter. It almost entirely removes the incentive to become a productive, conducive, peaceful and upstanding member of this new society a person would find themselves in, and in removing those windows it opens doors to all manner of illicit and immoral behaviours and activities instead. A state which pursues these goals of welfare alongside, say, a war on drugs or any kind of prohibition, then makes crime immensely profitable. So what you've done from the start is attracted unsavoury people with no ambition or good intentions and given them an outlet for violence which is more profitable than peace, all for the sake of stroking an ego inflated by altruism and false heroism, and the only people who could possibly benefit from this system over the next best alternatives are the ones willing to commit crime and sow dysfunction. So you might be confused at this point because it might sound like I'm completely contradicting myself, as I'm supposed to be in favour of immigration, and indeed I am. But you should also notice that the rhetoric I provided entirely revolved around the existence of the welfare state, so allow me to switch gears. A country which has open borders and absence of a welfare state as previously defined is a tremendously good thing for every single person involved. Indeed, this is the way things were done in America during her finer years before the World Wars, and similar in Britain around the same time, which is widely accepted to have been an absolutely good thing, especially by people on the right who these days chant "build the wall" in the States and "not racist, just don't like 'em" in the UK. What is particularly funny in a detrimental and sad way is that these are the same people who will cling on so dearly to the largest bastions of the welfare state that these countries have to offer in the present day, like the NHS, social security and minimum wage laws, completely ignorant of the fact that in doing so, they're directly helping cause the problems that immigration brings only when such institutions are present. The fact of the matter is, a libertarian immigration policy in this way has been proven as successful for both the migrants and the existing inhabitants, despite modern anti-immigration ideas that have absolutely no basis, like how it's claimed that immigrants steal jobs. I've had many people tell me, I don't care if a Pakistani becomes richer in my country, which I find nonsense for two reasons. For the economic reasons, first of all, their presence in a society which only rewards productive activity through a free market will directly make you and the wider community better off as well. If they can provide labour at a cheaper rate than the locals, your goods become cheaper and you can buy more for your money or save it. It allows the locals, who we will assume have a higher skill level than the migrants, to pursue more rewarding and higher paying jobs, creating a cycle of growth. You can do more with your money, and then you earn more money. A win-win for you. This is even evident in current states which have open borders and welfare, the losing formula, because despite large immigration numbers, job markets throughout Europe remain healthy and with low unemployment. So claiming an immigrant steals jobs from residents is a complete falsity. And if an immigrant sends some of their money that they earn back to their families, it is not simply taking wealth out of the economy. They earned that money through producing the wealth themselves. The benefits of their labour have already been realised in your economy within this cycle. And secondly, many of the people who make these arguments will tell you that at the top of their list of political priorities is freedom. It cannot be denied that freedom of movement is indeed an aspect of freedom. It is nothing but a contradiction to say that freedom is of importance to you, but then to just not care about the freedom of others just because they were born on a different piece of land than you, look different to you, worship different gods, or literally the same god but from a different interpretation, which is what Islam is to Christianity. Freedom is not free if it is not applied equally, and you can only ever do that by treating people as the individuals that they are. Now, these arguments don't even need to be applied to an outright open border policy, even though that is what I support from it. You can understand from these points that even if you do want to retain heavy control of the borders, this still leaves room for entry based on merit through a screening process if you want to be more than sure that the people entering are indeed of good mind and heart and will see in the vast benefits which I've given the examples of. But such a system should still accept more people and in a quicker time than existing screening processes like that of America and Australia, because like I've said, the vast majority of people will only be heading there to fulfill these criteria, as they simply wouldn't be able to survive by being violent little dickheads. And it's for that reason that I will say again that anything but open borders is pointless. You can say, but surely we should at least check that everyone coming in isn't a murderer or has otherwise ill intentions, and fine, you could, but that's assuming that strict border control can even do that, which it sure as hell can't. In reality, the only thing that strict border control can really do is exclude groups of people by collective means, making a vast majority of individuals pay for the crimes of a completely unrelated minority. And if you didn't know already, you really should know that libertarians are also absolutist in their stance towards being pro-gun. So even a kind of psychopath who could succeed in making money and surviving in a new country would still have the cards immensely stacked against them, as their supposed prey would likely be armed up to their eyeballs. So from all of this, I hope that you can see that by being pro-immigration, libertarians are absolutely not ignoring the waves of crime and terror that have struck most of Europe alongside its policies of mass immigration and providing absurd levels of welfare. The governments of Europe have condemned their citizens to a wretched fate by inviting and totally accommodating hundreds of thousands of people, and for the reasons discussed have created an environment that lets the disgusting ones among them thrive at the expense of the existing population and their fellow immigrants through literal monetary expense and by committing despicable acts of violence and terror. We do not support these methods and absolutely do not identify our own with theirs. Our methods seek the enrichment of those who are willing and able to earn it, and the protection of peaceful people with zero tolerance to those who try to abuse the peace and other opportunities which are afforded to them. So I feel I've covered all the major points, but there is still a bit more to be said. I want to end with an anecdotal point, so just bear with me. I once worked with a large amount of Polish and other Eastern European migrants. I got on particularly well with one who had his own firearm instruction business back in Poland and shared almost all of my political views with him. He told me how his father moved to the UK in the early 1960s after saving up just enough money to buy a house here. At the border, they checked his passport and that he had sufficient money to provide for himself, and that was that. He worked just as incredibly hard here as he had back in Poland, but received much more money from his work and created for himself and his family a life that was for them previously nothing more than a dream. He never harmed or detracted from a single person in doing so. Instead, he contributed in so many ways to his community and his new country. This was the absolute default process at the time, and the same thing was found from the Windrush generation who immigrated from the Caribbean at a similar time. Over time, their legacy was tarnished as political effort after political effort allowed the wider population to be tricked with needless guilt to impose methods of welfare for those people who were less fortunate than them, despite how much more fortunate they were now than in the countries that they came from. Decades of these sorts of policies and movements have destroyed nearly all of the work these previous immigrants achieved by overrunning their communities with people only out for ill-gotten gains and then crushing down on them with the hard fist of the law. It is nothing less than a story of betrayal by the willfully ignorant against the righteous for the benefit of the wicked, and that just makes me incredibly sad.